Hello, my name's Neil Carey, and I represent the charity Autism Bucks. As part of our program, we are interviewing some of our members about their experience with autism, and we are delighted today to be joined by Clare Doman, who has agreed to speak to us and tell us about her experiences. So, Clare, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
You're welcome. No problem.
Claire, my first question to you is, what made you think you may be autistic?
Um, a few years back, my youngest son was diagnosed as autistic. He's 14 now. He was 5 when he got his diagnosis.
Mhm.
Um, People would always comment when he was little that we were two peas in a pod. Um, and I understood Jaden on such a deep level,
Mm,
and I there was something that I have two older children as well. And I just I just knew what Jaden was going through, but I didn't really understand why. And the more I kind of learned about autism and him being autistic, there was just things that kind of resonated with me and made sense for how I possibly had felt when I was younger. Um, Through all of my life, my teenage life rather, I had been labeled as depressed.
mm,
Through my adult life, I'd had postnatal depression with my children, and I was always made to feel like I was that person. I was just depressed, and whatever I was struggling with in life was because of that. And I never really felt comfortable with that. Um, and I remember going to my GP and saying, there is something that I am wondering about, and I explained about my son, and she agreed to kind of look into it a little bit further. And I had to fill some questionnaires in, and that became my sort of journey of finding out I was autistic. But having an autistic son opens up kind of avenues of thought I think I'd never really had before.
mm.
And it just started making me see myself in a different way. Um, all my life I'd felt that I wasn't as good as everybody else. Everyone seemed to be able to do everything so much better than me. Um, I had to be perfect,
Mm.
and it was really hard for me to be perfect. I had to work harder than what I thought anyone else was doing. And I grew up feeling not good enough. I was never good enough. And I could never really understand why. And then obviously learning about my son and starting to see myself in a different light, and realizing that I wasn't a rubbish person. I wasn't failing at life. I actually was just autistic. And that the thought of there actually being a reason why I would struggle in certain situations or struggle with stressful times, and that I wasn't a depressed person, that made so much difference to me. But it was through having an autistic son that opened my eyes to the possibilities that I actually could be an autistic person.
Thank you for that. You've spoken about this a little bit already, but can you tell us a bit more about the process you went through to get diagnosed?
So I visited my GP and explained my thoughts, my concerns, and she asked me to complete a questionnaire. That questionnaire got sent off to the adult autism, I want to say department or unit. I can't remember their actual full title. I think they're based at the Whiteleaf Centre in Aylesbury. My questionnaire got sent off, and then they sent me back pages and pages of even further questionnaires. I had to fill them in, and my parents had to fill them in as well. Um, Thinking of me as a child who was kind of 4 or 5 years old, which, bearing in mind, I was 40 at that point. That was quite a mean feat to kind of remember everything about me when I was kind of 5 years old. So I filled the questionnaires in, and they got sent off again. And then I got a letter back to say that they would like to do an assessment for autism on me. But I did have to wait. It was approximately 18 months, maybe just over 18 months. My journey started when just after I turned 40, and I got my diagnosis when I was 42. So that's how long it took for me. But it was just a visit to my GP, first of all. And then there were just lots of questionnaires that I had to fill in. And then at the assessment, you then have to go face to face. And there was a psychologist, and there was an occupational therapist, and they ask you lots of questions, and you have to kind of do some activities, like reading a story that has no words. And um it was strange for me. It almost kind of felt a bit silly, but I had to kind of make up a story with um some little things that the person had bought with them. And it was very strange, I must admit. But that's how it all started, just a visit to the GP, and then just they sort of ask you to fill in questionnaires, and then it goes from there.
Claire, how did you feel when they actually told you that you are autistic?
It was a lot of different emotions. It actually makes me emotional thinking about it now. um the very, very first emotion I felt was almost relief.
Mhm.
It was relief that there was a reason why I had struggled throughout my life. There was a reason. It wasn't just because I was rubbish or no good. There was an actual reason. I wasn't depressed. I never had postnatal depression. I was just overstimulated and just wasn't getting the right support I needed. So that was possibly the first emotion. And I cried. I cried a lot, hence why it's so emotional for me now. And I must admit, it did it did knock me. Um, Lots of people that knew me kept saying to me, "You're still you, you're still you." And what they didn't understand is I wasn't me,
Mm.
because I didn't know who I was, because I'd always had to be what I thought other people wanted me to be. I tried to fit in. Obviously, I'm aware that that was masking. I've masked my whole life. It's like a chameleon.
Mm.
I become different people in different situations to fit in. So I didn't know who I was, and it was such turmoil inside of me. It took me a few months to, in a way, grieve. I was going through a grieving process, grieving of the person who I was, and who I possibly how things could have been if I'd have known that I was autistic. But after about 6 months, I felt such empowerment. I had actually become happy, or more relaxed. Because to be honest with you, I don't actually know what happy means. So I can't really explain happy. So I just knew that I relaxed into it. It empowered me. I became who I am today. I've been on such a journey. I'm 47 now. So over the past 5 years, I've been on a journey to rediscover myself, and doing that as an autistic person. Of course, I still mask, but I give myself time to be who I am. And I'm accepting that. I'm not blaming myself for not being able to do certain things a certain way. But the feelings that I went through were so many. But after a few months, that is the best word I can use. I was empowered. I was empowered. Being an autistic woman actually made me feel stronger,
Mm.
because it actually meant that with support, with supporting myself in certain ways, I actually could just get on in life, and I didn't necessarily have to have such a difficult time as what I had done when I was younger. So I went through many emotions, but at the end I came out of it, and it made my life so much better. That's for personally for me, that's how it felt.
No, that was really powerful. Thank you for being so open about that. If I could just move on to asking you how autism affects the way you do your job at the moment.
At the moment, my job is going well. I work in a school with primary age children. I am an advocate for our autistic and our ADHD and our SEN children. Um, that is something I'm very passionate about because I know my son had a very hard time at school, in a mainstream school, and I work in a mainstream school. And I want to use the knowledge I have to help children so they don't have such a tough time at school. So at the moment, I work in a great school. Everyone knows that I'm autistic, and they are so accepting of that and understanding. And they love to hear me talk about it and explain things to them. And it also helps me understand even more about myself, because sometimes I'll be like, oh, do you do this? And my neurotypical friends will be like, no, well, that's not, we don't do that. And I'd be like, oh, okay. So I thought that is me then, and I'm constantly learning about what it means for me to be autistic. But I'm very lucky that I do have a very supportive team around me at work. And if there are moments when I am experiencing autistic burnout, when things are just gets building up a little bit too much, and that does happen, um, I have people I can go to at work, and then we look, and I can take a bit of a break, and we can look at how we're going to sort of help me. But at the moment, um, the job that I have is working really well for me. Hasn't always been like that, but that was mainly before I knew that I was autistic. So I didn't know how to ask for certain supports. Um, and I would put so much pressure on myself to be perfect and do a great job. I don't know how to necessarily balance things. So I give 110% to every single person in my life. And I don't always give back to myself. And I'm learning that more now. But I am very lucky that I have a good supportive team around me at work, um, who want to understand. And that is one of the most amazing things, that people want to understand what it means to be autistic. And along the way, I tend to find people will come to me and say, I think I'm autistic too. And I'm going through this process. And it's really lovely because then we can create this little support network around us. So I do feel that I am in a very amazing situation where I have great people around me. Not every day is great, not every day is good. I do have those days, where things don't go the way I want them. But that's just part and parcel of being autistic. But yeah, I am very lucky that where I work, they're very understanding. So yeah, that does help me a lot at work.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you have partially answered my next question. But can you think of any more, I use the phrase reasonable adjustments that have been made in your workplace to help you?
Yeah. As I said, if I feel like everything is a bit too much, I'm experiencing burnout. I my line manager is very good at saying, right, what do you need? So I can perhaps take an afternoon off a week. I can sometimes work a little bit later. Um, Morning times can be a bit stressful because I do have my son to get ready, and being an autistic teenager, um, he can. There are struggles that he goes through. So morning times can be very stressful. So I always have that option of maybe working a little bit later in the morning, just so it kind of helps me to regulate myself and keep myself okay in that sense. But yeah, if I needed to lower my hours or anything like that, that is something that my work are willing to have a chat about. And I think it's very important as well to, I'm very open about my autism. I'm very open about being autistic. And I will share that with anyone, because I think the more understanding in the world around us will mean that more reasonable adjustments can be made, because people do want to understand. So I think it is very important that I have been very open about how work affects me, and how sometimes I can experience burnout, and that can last in various different amounts. Some days it will be days, sometimes it might be weeks, and I can function when in burnout, but it's almost like my main computer has frazzled, the fuse has blown, and I'm just on a very small backup generator, so I can just function as minimal as I need to get on. By being honest and open with people about how your executive functioning can falter sometimes, and that you need more time to regulate, it allows, well, for me, it allows my employer to be able to support in the right way. So reasonable adjustments for me are working a little bit later in the morning sometimes, or possibly maybe having a day or half a day off during the week, just so that I have time to regulate myself, so I can carry on going and do my job properly.
So Claire, we've looked at your work life, but how has autism impacted your social life?
Um, my social life is probably the one thing that is impacted the most. At work, I can control certain things so that it works in my favor. Uh, Social life, however, is a very different thing. So what happens for me a lot of the time is I want to socialize. I want to go and spend time with my friends. And when I was younger, I made myself do those things. And then could never really understand why I was just so tired, and I would feel so, oh, I don't know what the word is. I know now it's being overwhelmed, but at the time I didn't really know how to explain any of that. What I find is that sometimes I find it very difficult to leave my house. I'm not really very, I don't always tell people that. Um, Even going for a walk can be very difficult. Just the thought of leaving the house. And it's the thought of having to talk to people, or having to, I don't know who I'm going to bump into or what's going to happen. But it's not only the people, sometimes it's just a feeling, just being outside. There's so much that's going on. I never really thought of myself as somebody who had issues with their sensory processing. But sometimes if it's too hot or it's too cold or it's too windy or it's going to rain, the thought of going outside, I just don't want to do it. Um, Friends of mine over the years will organize things to do, um, and I will want to go and I will go. But there's such anxiety involved around where I'm going, who's going to be there, what's it going to be like. And that manifests itself in making it look like I'm very stressed. And I worry, what am I going to wear? What am I going to, what do I have to wear? Where are we going with? And I realized only recently, actually, that the reason why I worry so much about who will be there or what the place is or what I need to wear is because it's part of my masking. I need to know what everyone else is going to be doing, because I need to fit in. And maybe fit in isn't the right way of putting it. It's almost I want to blend in so I don't stand out. Um, I am getting slightly better at giving myself a break of that and just being like, do you know what? It's okay. just be you. I keep telling myself, just be yourself. It's okay. You don't have to be anyone in particular. And I am trying to be more honest with people who I meet about being autistic. My close friends obviously are aware, um, and try and understand as best as they can. And sometimes that does help me, when they tell me just to come on, get on with things, and they try and take me places, because just leaving the house is a big deal sometimes. Um, and it's probably one of the more negative parts of being autistic. And I don't really like talking about autism as in a negative sense, because I like there are parts of me being autistic which is quite a positive thing, but the actual trying to be social can be such a lot. And for example, I was recently out with some friends, and it's the aftermath. So I can this the build up to it, and then I will enjoy myself. But so recently, I went out, and the build up to it is sometimes the worst part. I go out and I can enjoy myself for a few hours, but then I always know when I've shut off. Um, and friends of mine will think I'm bored or I'm not having a good time, and that's not the case. It's just become too overstimulating for me. Um, Recently, on this particular occasion, I lost my bag, and I could not handle that situation. It made no sense to me. My bag was with me one minute, then my bag wasn't with me, and I had a complete meltdown. And I don't normally do that in front of people, but there was loud music, there was lots of people, this had happened. And I did have to be honest with people and say, I'm autistic and I'm finding this situation very difficult. That was probably the most honest I've been socially, because I couldn't contain how I was feeling. And sometimes that's the worst part of being about the socializing side of things, because I have people around me that try and understand, but it's the people beyond that that don't necessarily understand. And it then takes you back to when you're younger and you're feeling judged and you're not included and you don't feel part of everything. And it can bring back those quite negative feelings. So it's a bit tricky sometimes. Socializing is hard. That's that's it. And I try my best to socialize. Um, and also for the sake of my youngest son, I do try, and we have to get out, we have to do things. I have to teach him how to get out sometimes. So in a sense, it's quite good because we can help each other. But I do find socializing the hardest thing, to be honest with you.
I understand. Um, Claire, my final question to you is, what advice would you give to someone who's just been diagnosed as autistic?
That's interesting. My advice would be to take some time to think about what it means to you to be autistic, what that means from the experiences you've had in the past. Because a lot of how you felt in a negative sense was more than likely because you were autistic and just didn't know about it. That was my experience. I'd grown up not feeling good enough. And as soon as I realized I was autistic, that made such a difference to me. And I still look back now and think, oh yeah, I felt like that as a child, and I felt like this, and it's okay because I was autistic. And also try and reach out to other autistic people. That makes a big difference. Coming to some of the Autism Bucks meetings made such a huge difference to me, because I wasn't alone. And that is the massive thing to understand. You're not alone. And all the things that you think are possibly just things that you do, the chances are there are a lot of autistic people that do the same thing, live their lives the same way, and you have such shared experiences. And when you realize that, it doesn't feel so lonely out there. And it does make a big difference to speak to other autistic people. Social media is also a really great platform to learn and hear from other autistic people. I've found out so much information to understand myself through through different social media platforms. There are autistic adults all over the world sharing their stories, and it makes so much difference to hear from other people because you know that it's not just you. And that makes such a difference when you're on your journey. And I've been, as I said, been on my journey for 5 years now. My journey of learning about me being autistic is never going to end because there are still things I'm still learning every day. And the more I learn from other people or learn from my own experiences, it helps me know how to support myself as an autistic person. So it can feel very scary at the beginning when you're first diagnosed, and that's why I say just take some time just to reflect, just to accept, because it can feel like grief. It can feel like you're grieving the person that you once were, and as though you're still that person, you just become to understand yourself a little bit more. So that's the only sort of advice that I can really think that from my experiences, that's the sort of advice that would have helped me.
And I think that's pretty good advice. Claire, I was trying to think of a word to summarize what we've heard from you. And I think that word is inspirational. That was absolutely wonderful. We really appreciate you giving us the time. We really appreciate sharing as openly as you've done. And believe me, it will help other people. So Claire, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome, Neil. You're very welcome.